Hey guys, in this episode, we're going to talk to Rob Wilson, who was a professional for 13 years internationally, played on the Canadian national team with Steve Nash. It's a really interesting story. Before we get to that, I want to tell you about La Sierra's business school called the Zapara School of Business. I was actually at La Sierra recently for a conference unrelated to basketball or anything, and I attended an event that the Zapara School of Business held called Meet the Firms. It had a ton of employers. All the college students that were there at La Sierra got to meet a bunch of employers, and it was just a really great event. They've been doing it for 42 years, and it's just a microcosm of the kind of experiences that La Sierra University creates for its students, specifically in the business department there. The Zapara School of Business offers a ton of degrees. They offer degrees, these are 4-year majors: accounting, business analytics, finance, management, management for healthcare professionals, healthcare management, marketing, human resource management, business and society. I don't even know what that is. It sounds interesting. International business, political economy. You can even customize a major. They also have a few minors you can get there at the Zapara School of Business: real estate management, and marketing. If you've already completed college and you think that going back to school might improve your career path, they offer an MBA, Master of Business Administration. You can concentrate it in finance, healthcare management, human resource management, marketing, or work with them and they can actually customize the concentration that you want. La Sierra University believes that the value of your education is found through its use. They design all their programs and experiences using the latest information, tools, resources, and opportunities so you can immediately act on what you learn. The Zapara School of Business involves their students, alumni, and employers in the design and improvement of the experiences they create. And every day, they challenge their students to push beyond the perceived limits of their own potential. In your college experience, every day should be an opportunity to push and challenge yourself to reach new heights. If you're currently looking at your options of where to take the next step in education, La Sierra wants you to research and visit as many schools as possible for comparison. They want you to choose La Sierra, not settle for anything. Are you ready for a true, engaging, business-ready experience? Visit lasierra.edu/schools/business. And now on to this episode with Rob Wilson. Hey everybody, welcome to the Adventist Hoops podcast. Today, I have a really special guest who played with Steve Nash on the Canadian national team, played professionally for 13 seasons internationally, and was one of the founders of a sport called SlamBall. Technically, he was one of my church members back in the day when I was a pastor straight out of college, but it was I that actually looked up to him as a young man in more ways than one. He's 6'8", but also he's just an exceptional and talented person with a really interesting story. Rob Wilson, welcome to the Adventist Hoops podcast.
We're happy to be here. Brother Dustin Comm. It's been a long time, and I think everyone knows that you've looked exactly the same for a lot of
Well,
years,
thank you.
which we admire about you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Rob, I was telling you just before we started, I'm really excited to have everyone hear your story, but I'm also excited to hear your story because I didn't really bug you about it when we went to the same church years ago, and so I'm excited to hear some of the details that I didn't just explicitly ask you at the time. So why don't you just start off by telling us where you grew up and how you got into basketball?
Wow. Okay. So originally I'm Canadian, so I'm transplanted down here. I come from a diverse background. My dad's from Jamaica. My mom was from Trinidad. Um, thing about Canada that some people know if they've been there is there's nobody in Canada from Canada. Canada is a gigantic country of immigrants, and they flocked. Back in the 40s, 50s, the 60s, everybody was heading to Canada hard. So Toronto, it was an incredible city. I mean, the one thing that everyone kind of knew about Toronto is if you can't afford to travel to Europe or overseas, you want authentic food, you go to Toronto. That's where you're going to get everything. And people are always, when the Toronto Raptors finally came into inception and people were like, oh, well, man, I don't know. They didn't know anything about the city of Toronto, but all the players came up there and they were like, this place bangs. I mean, Toronto has everything going on. So you had a lot of guys who were very happy with that whole the Raptors situation. And of course, it's still going strong. But that's kind of where I grew up, and I grew up depending on the where in the city you are potentially. It's completely like when I grew up in um, elementary school. I think I was the only kid in my class who did not have a Greek last name. It was all, and when they dismissed school at the end of the end of the day, I probably, along with one other kid, got up and left. Everyone stayed for Greek school, which was a couple hours after. So then I had moved in that time, and we moved a couple times when I was growing up. So we kind of experienced a completely different place, depending on where in Toronto you were. So growing up, I mean, I actually grew up Seventh-day Adventist. So I was in church from day one, and we had a lot of options. Of course, it was like church or death. And then my mom was like, "Okay, we're going to do some piano lessons." So we piano lessons or death. Violin was something she thought for whatever reason that I should be studying as well. So again, I had the option though. Always have an option. So all of those things happen. Typical. You know, Adventist upbringing from the Caribbean. Let's put it that way. So that's kind of the flavor of it all. And when I was in school at some point, never went to Adventist school. Was in the public school system. So it was a sink or swim. We were like, hey, if you can make it here, it's like New York. You can make it anywhere. So baptism by fire, and having all of those conversations back in the day with other kids, like, well, why can't you do this on Saturday or whatever? It was like, well, let me explain this for you. And some people just couldn't, they couldn't understand. What are you talking about? You're very strange. You're going to church on Sabbath and all these things. So at some point, I was always a big kid, tall kid specifically. But then I, just can never stop growing. Everybody else kind of did. And somebody one day was like, "Brother, you're way too tall for the violin. You need to be thinking about some sports." And I always, I love to play sports of any sort. I didn't have a direction. Football was actually where I ended up gravitating toward. Loved playing football. Loved the just the contact. I guess just great running people over. It's wonderful.
Well,
But
this makes sense for when we talk about slam ball later. I didn't know that.
it
So you played a little
it
football.
probably
What
does.
position did you play?
Yes, I was definitely a tight end. One of the bigger tight ends. And my high school career was it's pretty great. Toronto at the time was we've always had great talent in Toronto, athletic talent, but before the internet really came into it, there's a lot of people that went unrecruited and unknown in a lot of different sports. But now, the world is much smaller. It's obviously shrunk due to the internet, so everyone can get recruited. You can see everyone everywhere. And when I was playing, I kind of turned my talents to football first. We were a heavily football school in high school. We had a basketball team. I was on that team. The coaching wasn't really anything. Nobody really cared about it. So we didn't really have tournaments or anything. We just played our season and we were good. I loved basketball, but football was kind of what put us on the map for our
Yeah.
school. So we ended up winning the Toronto, Greater Toronto Area Championship. And at that, I had my best game ever was in that game.
Wow.
There, lots of scouts and things like that. So football is kind of where I thought I was going to go. And then
And what year were you?
I that was in terms of what
In
year
high school?
school.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it started off with me as a sophomore. That's when I kind of got onto the team, and then my sophomore, junior, and senior year. The other thing about Canada is we actually have in Ontario, where I was from, Toronto, Ontario, we have a grade 13. So not only do you have sophomore, junior, senior, then you've got however you want to say it, senior plus. It was just another year of school, so I got to play those extra years, and that was great. And we went to the finals one year, and then we won the championship the next year. So that was the back-to-back year. So that was great. I had a lot of interest from the U.S. for football, and in fact, my plan was to go to Purdue. They were very, very interested, and they were like, "Hey, I had Eastern Michigan and Purdue in a couple places." But if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Um,
Mhm.
so he kind of laughed at that. So what happened? It's a long story. I got a minor kind of injury with my ankle, and then the recruiting guy came up and he was like, "Oh, what's going on there?" I was like, "Oh, nothing. That's a Band-Aid." And all of a sudden, people get the word. Oh, so I ended up staying home, which my mom wanted me to anyway. Attended the University of Toronto, which is a very kind of academically prestigious university up here. It would be a equivalent of an Ivy League
Wow.
in the States. It's a huge university, 170,000 undergraduates, located in downtown Toronto.
170,000? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's huge, and now it's three campuses, so combined population is big. But it wasn't about, when you have that many people, you're thinking everything is going to be amazing. But we had a terrible football team.
Mm.
I witnessed that team get smashed 75-7 in a homecoming game, and I was like, I love football. I don't love that, you know. And of course, you're playing outside, and in late November, those games get pretty frosty, and I just not feeling that, man. Love the sport. So the university coach at University of Toronto realized, he knew who I was because I had some accolades with football coming in, and he's like, hey, I know you also play basketball. You should come out here. And they actually had a good program. He was actually a American up at University of Toronto who was coaching. Incredible coach, actually, a guy named Gib Chapman. He was there for my first 2 years. He kind of was like, hey, we need to get this done. You need to be here. And that's, I went to the basketball route, and I wasn't super skilled, but I understood the game of basketball at its grassroots is get the ball in the net. He's like, hey, you can dunk the ball. I was like, I can do that. So do that and do it a lot. So that's what he was like. Let's do this. And I really enjoyed my time with him. He actually got an offer to go back to the U.S. to New Hampshire, D1, and he left after my sophomore year. So and he was, there was some talk about, oh, you're Rob's going to go with him, and there's lots of rumors. And he goes, listen, I obviously would love to take you with me, but you have 2 years left here, or 3 years, because we can actually, in Canada, before NIL and everything happened, COVID years, in Canada, you could always play for 5 years. You
Mm.
had 5 years of eligibility at university. So but the stipulation at the time was you had to play your fifth year wherever you played your fourth year.
Ah.
So we didn't have this massive transfer portal happening, but every now and again, you'd see a guy play 3 years somewhere, transfer, and then play his final 2 years somewhere else.
Mm.
So that kind of made sense to the Canadian athletic brain, where it's like, okay, we have some levels of, loyalty or connectivity in the teams, that instead of now where it's just, people are flipping every year.
Yeah.
So I didn't go with him to New Hampshire. I stayed at University of Toronto, but right after that, this is a offshoot side since we're into all of it. AUC, the old Atlantic Union College,
Yeah.
they had a guy who wrote his master's on competition and sports in the church, because maybe some of your younger viewers don't realize competition has never been looked on particularly kindly by the church. They don't love it. I kind of can understand that a little bit better now than when I was younger, but it's not something, that's why a lot of our, upper education has nothing to do with sports of any sort. But this guy wrote his master's and kind of pitched it to AUC, and they were like, hey, you know what? Let's see what happens. They gave him a budget, and they said, go ahead and put a team together. So they had already played a year or 2 years in the NAIA. He got wind that there was an Adventist playing up in Toronto. I don't know how, but he showed up at a game to find out that myself and the point guard on our team were both Adventist. And we had a great game that night. It was a playoff game, so our gym was as packed as it could be for us. I mean, I think we probably had 1,200 or 1,500 in the gym, and we had a great game. And there was a point in the game, I didn't actually know he was there, and I was having an okay game. Let's put it that way. But there was a point where it's like a guy went to take a charge, and I was a little frustrated because I already had 4 fouls, but we were up by 18 or something, and there's like 3 or 4 minutes left, and I'm like, if you're going to go out, pick your spots. And the funny thing is, I knew that guy from just years before. He had been a high school player in Toronto, like myself. And I recognized him, but he just slid over, and he's not that huge a guy. I was like, bro, you're standing like in a bad place, right in front. And we were coming down to fast breaks. So I was like, well, this is my last play, or it's a block. And it ended up being a charge, but it went in, and, the gym erupted.
Yeah.
The coach was
People
just
can't
like,
hear the call anyways, and yeah, I
nah,
think it's a
yeah.
amazing poster. Yeah.
Yeah, so the coach was just like kind of shaking his head. He could kind of see it. I was like, the game's over, and it was. But I exited to that, and then afterwards, the gentleman, and I honestly I can't remember his name. I should, but he introduced himself, told me what his plan was, and I ended up going down there,
Mm.
to AUC to see what was
This is
happening.
great. See, this
Um,
is one I've had one other guest like mention AUC before. So I'm really glad because I just don't know a lot about the
yeah,
program while I was there. This is great.
Well, I mean, AUC, from what now it's really not in existence anymore. I
Really?
think they
Oh,
have some, yeah, I think they have some online stuff for just a certain amount of thing, but not much. But AUC then was, it was the East Coast PUC,
hmm.
if you will. And they had a student body. I went down there and I saw everything. And I think the biggest thing for me was at the time, almost none of my credits were going to transfer. And, I was already finished 2 years of kind of an economics and commerce degree at University of Toronto. And I was like, boy, that's a big throwaway here, to kind of maybe scrape together a year of credits out of the two. And, University of Toronto was a powerful degree. I had no real plans on what the future was going to look like, but I figured I'd probably be in Toronto. So having a U of T degree in Toronto seemed like a really good plan at the time. So did spend some time with him, and we did talk at length about basketball and spirituality and the future. And it was a good visit, but ultimately I didn't make that choice to transfer. Finished up the rest of my time at University of Toronto, and had um, good years, good personal accolades. I became an All Canadian, equivalent of All American, obviously down here. Smaller pool, I'm not saying anything. I mean, we have I don't know, maybe 70 some colleges across Canada or something like that, maybe 80 something. So nowhere close to the size and breadth of NCAA. Division One, obviously notwithstanding Division Two, Division Three, NAIA, etc. So did have a good career there. We had some problems with our team in my later years. With a university as big as we are, we could not field 12 players, which was crazy.
That
So
is
we
crazy.
were practicing yeah, it was crazy. We had like 7 or 8 guys on the team my senior year. I mean, hey, coach, just challenge the other team to 3-on-3. We will destroy anyone 3-on-3. We were just out in front of it, obviously. So
Well, you don't
we,
have to worry about playing time, I guess, so that's good.
no, not it wasn't going to happen. I was never getting off the court. That was fine. There was myself and another guy who was also 6'8", so we were like the twin towers for Toronto. And actually, the coach in my third, fourth, and fifth year was a guy named Ken Olynyk. Name sounds familiar because his son is Kelly Olynyk,
Uh,
who's still in the NBA now. So I used to babysit Kelly
uh,
Olynyk, and he was like, no, he was
that's
a
awesome.
gigantic 5-year-old, gigantic, because Ken Olynyk is 6'8" and his wife is 6'3", 6'4". So they knew Kelly was going to be a big kid, and he was. So that's how kind of I got that to the end of my college career, and then I was like, oh, what now? And then the next chapter begins.
I was just going to ask, I mean, growing up Seventh-day Adventist, how did you approach, collegiate university basketball and the Sabbath?
So the good bad part is actually not bad at all. So growing up in high school, there were several basketball tournaments on Saturdays, but as I said, since our school wasn't really a basketball school, we didn't really get involved or enrolled in any of those tournaments. So literally, I think I missed 2 tournaments for Sabbath in my entire high school basketball career. No issue. And the games were always played right after school. So it's like a Tuesday or a Thursday. You finish school. We would finish school around 3:15 or 3:30. Then you get dismissed early as an athlete. You get to the gym and change, and we'd be playing those games in the weeknights. So there was no issue there whatsoever. Football was much the same. But the football was played throughout the week. It wasn't Friday night lights or anything like that in Toronto. So all of the football games were actually played during the week. Then when we got to the Metro Bowl, there was this whole thing about they wanted to do this kind of like a Final Four, and they did it on the Friday, Saturday. But we shockingly drew the first game on Friday, which was around 2 p.m. Sundown, and we're not being legalistic here. That's a whole nother theology. But sundown was like 4:30. So we actually got on the field, got off the field. I'm like, ooh, safe. And we won. And then the Saturday night game was the big game. That was the whole. So it did not impact me in any way, shape, or form. Now, having said that, obviously it's completely different with high school now, AAU circuit, high school football in particular, Friday Night Lights. So those are conversations that are very tough. And when a kid has a lot of talent and he just can't go down that direction, I'm not the bearer of all information for sure, good or bad, but I know those are tough conversations, and you really have to kind of be grounded and know who you are and what ultimately is very important. So moving to college, College obviously bore a little more problems in terms of that. The coach, I sat down with the coaches at the time, and a little bit different as well. I'm not here on full scholarship. We didn't have scholarships in Canada. So when you went to university, you were paying, and you walk into a professor, hey, we're going to travel, we have games, what the tests we have, blah, blah. Yeah, yeah, I don't care, kid.
Oh,
You're
wow.
here paying. Yeah, so it wasn't somebody doing your homework for you or anything like that. That's not my experience
Yeah.
as a college athlete. So it didn't. Again, there were some shoot around practices in the mornings on Saturday. I was opted out of those. Coach had no problem with that. There were a couple of travel trips, but for the most part, the Sabbath didn't impact my collegiate career. It would have been a whole different conversation had I gone stateside, of
Mm-hmm.
course, and played football then. But maybe that's why God took that off my plate. He knew that I was not in a position to make uh, good decisions being a 21-year-old. I'm not crying down anybody, but we know that, hey man, the brain is not fully formed in most males, or close to it at 21 years old. So
Did you always
it's good.
know? Did you always know you were gonna try to play professionally, or was that something that kind of developed as you developed?
I think it wasn't a plan that I had. I don't, I think there's definitely kids now and they're in grade school and they're like, yeah, when I'm in the NFL, or when I'm in the NBA, it's like, okay, you definitely have great insight or far sight, however you want to say it. I did not.
Aspirations.
I wasn't thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that. It was just like I really love sports. I did. I understood. Hey, I was watching all the NBA on the weekends. I was watching NCAA. I was watching NFL. Following all that stuff. But I didn't really kind of superimpose myself into the TV and say, hey, one day I could be there. And that wasn't, because that's not the upbringing or the background I come from. My family is doctors, dentists, teachers, and nothing else. Pastors, sure, we can throw those, we'll sprinkle those in. There's no athletes of any sort in my family anywhere, because it's just not anything that we ever considered. Hey, this is something you can do as livelihood. And I don't even think I was necessarily considering that, as a college student. Only at the end of my fourth year, I started being like, hey, I've put all of this time now into training, into sports, into nutrition. And what happens? Like, just like a lot of guys coming out of college here, NCAA, you're the best you're ever going to be. And, you've played 4 years of college ball, or in some cases now 6 or 7, depending if you're super senior in the COVID year.
Mhm.
So there's a big investment here, and then all for naught. Okay, now it's time for you to get a job. So that's really tough. And it wasn't like something that was looming large for me either. I kind of understood that my life was going to be, in maybe in finance or whatever. I had no problem thinking about that. But then the closer I got to guess finishing my last year of eligibility, I'm like, hey, basketball's a thing. And then of course along the way I got invited to a couple of tryouts for the junior national team, for some representatives, for like the FISU student games and these types of things. And I didn't make it for two of them I tried out for, and I just didn't know what was going on. I was like, and I was not playing the way I was capable of play. I was just think I was a little overwhelmed or odd in the moment. It's like, now we've taken this up another level and they're talking about international games. But then when I got to the end of my senior year, I was like, huh, what's going to happen here? So then we kind of adjusted the plan. I was like, I do want to, continue this if I can.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate. I got, well, I guess this is stage 3. I got hooked up with a guy who had a connection in Sweden. So, if you ask a 6'8", 21-year-old, hey, you want to go over to Sweden, Scandinavia and play professional basketball? I was like, where's the downside here? I can't find it. Can't find it. So I ended up over there, and that was my first taste of international basketball. And actually, again, the games in Sweden, shockingly, we played Thursday nights. It was a club called Arvika on the right close to the border of Norway, Oslo. And that was the first place that I played, and it was great. It was kind of like a small town, um, not some Real Madrid or a monster club by any means. Really home cooking kind of thing. There's a lot of the kids who grew up in the town played for the senior team. So I was like, the import back then. It wasn't. There's a lot of rules that have changed overseas, but it was a really great first spot for me. We played Thursday nights, so Saturdays was kind of free, and then we played Sunday afternoons. So again,
Perfect.
yeah, just under the radar, looking pretty good. So that again, the Sabbath didn't really impact me too much. And then after that year, I was like, okay, then I spent nothing but time in the weight room and in the gym when I was over there. I literally had keys to the weight room. So, I was already, pretty big, 6'8", and I was always a weight room guy. I know I really pushed that envelope while I was overseas. Just living in the weight room just was like, hey, you might be more skilled than me, but you're gonna be real tired by the time the fourth quarter rolls around. Because
Mm.
if you have somebody 250 pounds, 260 pounds leaning on you for 40 minutes, that ain't great if you're 220 pounds. So I was really in the weight room, and then as like went back that summer, and there was the Canadian national team. They kind of always target everybody who's overseas. They want to see what you've been doing. So I went to the national team where I had not had success before, and they were like, "Oh, you changed." There's a lot, and it
Well,
was a different mentality.
I'm amazed to hear you say 260 just because you're pretty lean, now, but or at least you were last time I saw you. But I mean, but so you must have had a lot of mass at that point.
Well, you remember that you were living in California here when we had the era of really big suits.
Yeah.
I mean, I was never lighter than like 245, even when you were here.
Okay.
Um, that's pretty much the lightest I've been. I hover right around there even now. That's kind of, I'm still in the weight room because my boys are, so we still get a lot of lifting in. But yeah, the heaviest I ever played at, I was about 257, 258. Yeah, it was just weight room time, protein powder, and creatine. That was,
So the
back in the day
Canadian,
when creatine just got invented.
yeah, right. Yeah. And you had to drink a ton of water. People weren't really
Mm,
sure what it was doing to you, if it was bad or not.
yeah,
Yeah. So these coaches,
exactly.
you come back to the tryout and they're like, okay, he looks different, he's playing different, and what
Yeah.
happened?
So the funny thing is that was 1993. So the whole thing with the World Championships that were coming up, they were going to be in this is before your time. When were you born again?
84. I mean,
80, okay, so
I was watching.
you were on the board.
94.
You were on the board. Yes. So 94, the World Championships was in Toronto. So that first season I had was 92, I think 93, and they said, okay, we're putting together this plan, and we want these members of the Canadian national team to essentially uh, centralize in Toronto and stay together the whole year. We're going to travel. We're going to play teams in obviously in the States and North America. We're going to travel overseas. We're going to play in some big time tournaments. And then that next summer, we're going to play on the world stage, and it's going to be at Toronto Sky Dome, and it's the biggest basketball competition there is. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm geeked for that. So we stayed together as a team, the Canadian national team, and of course, there's some moving pieces because there's some guys who did not elect to stay because they had some super lucrative deals. There was some guys who were kind of floating around, NBA, Bill Whittington back in the day, Kyle Wilcher, a few guys like that. So, but essentially the team was pretty much there. So we did train all year. We played a Big East tour where I got to play against, UConn, Boston College, Connecticut, some big name guys. Back in Danielle Marshall was one of the players at UConn that was ruling the NCAA back then. We played against Georgetown Patrick Ewing's kid was there at the time. So it was really great competition. That was all through the month of, I think, October before the NCAA, kind of kicks off their season. So we were like, and we did. The funny thing is, we finished, and then we said, okay, we're going to have a 2-week break because we've been going at it hard all summer. There was a professional league up here in Canada that we were playing in all summer, and then we said, okay, we're going to do this Big East tour, but we're going to have this 2-week break. We took the 2-week break, and the day before we came back from the break, the Russian national team was scheduled to play North Carolina and canceled. Couldn't make it. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, we need a team, and they're like, hey, call the Canadians. So they call the Canadians, and that is a game I would have relished to play in. However, there were so many things. I had then herniated a disc in my back, L4, L5, S1. Actually, it was really bad, and I was just barely coming back from that. We had all been off for 2 weeks, so nobody had done any training. It was just like because we went hard in the summer. We had to compete in the Tournament of the Americas. That is, like USA, Cuba, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, whoever had qualified for that first stage. So we had qualified already, but we were also going to be the host country in '94. So I was on the Canadian team at that point. Steve Nash was a junior on that team. So we had him out there, but he wasn't really doing anything. It's like, okay, Steve, pass the ball, don't mess up, and grab the bags when you're done. So, but we all knew Steve Nash was going to be good. Like
Yeah.
he had come back to the national team after his first year at Santa Clara when he hit those big free throws. Well, we remember it against UCLA to put them to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Knew the kid was going to be good. We're like, yeah, he's okay. There's a lot of talent. He's okay. So let him carry the bag. So we did what we did at the Tournament of the Americas. I was started on that team and logged a ton of minutes because one of our other guys, right before we left, he got in some trouble. That's what athletes sometimes do. And we brought in, another guy, but he wasn't that guy. So I got a lot of minutes, had a great tournament down there, played some great, against Puerto Rico. They had some NBA guys, Pico Lean, Big Baby, and just a whole bunch of other, not the Big Baby,
Not
there
Glenn
was
Davis.
another one.
Okay.
No, there was another one back then, but it was really good talent. A couple of other NBA / fringe NBA guys who played for Argentina and played for. There was also a guy in Mexico, but all just really, really good ball. So I was like, really like, hey, this is amazing. And we traveled, and then we traveled the world. But getting back to that story, we walked into the Dean Dome completely underprepared. And this was the senior year for Rasheed Wallace, for Jerry
I was gonna
Stackhouse,
say that must
and
have been like Stackhouse era.
yeah, Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, and Montross, Eric Montross. He was a big. So that was who I was covering. It's like he wasn't very quick, I'll tell you that, but he was huge. He was just huge. So, and we, like I said, woefully unprepared. We had like 3 practices, and they were just, they were wild dogs. They were rabid. They were just salivating to get on the court. And this is their first, game for the kickoff season. And yeah, I mean, within minutes, we're like, this was a mistake. you know? So we ended up losing by 40, and it was a tough game. The crowd was crazy. Rasheed Wallace was also crazy. I mean, I'd heard a lot of things about Rasheed Wallace, but seeing it, it's super talented. I mean, oh man, 6'11", can do everything. But what a maniac on the court, just talking. And the word was, after that year, it's Dean Smith that told him, hey, if you're playing college ball anymore, it won't be here. You can transfer. And that's before transfer was really a thing.
Yeah,
There's only a
like...
few guys. So he turned pro after that 1 year. He was like, I ain't coming back to school. Forget that. And he didn't need it. He was incredible. He had no head on his shoulders. Like he was wild, but man, talented. And Stackhouse was super athletic, just running everywhere. So it was a tough game. And I was, physically just unable to do a lot of stuff. And that was really sad because it's like, that's a opportunity that you're not going to see all the time. But slowly my back got better. I didn't elect to not do surgery, etc. But the problem was, by the time I kind of got ready, I wasn't fully ready to then play with the world championship team. And that was really tough. So I was still on the team, but the coach was like, hey, we're going to bring in Bill Wington was already there, but Greg Wiltshire, he's another center. It's like, we're going to bring him in as well. And you're going to be a reserve. And that hurt, but physically just, I was there, watched all the games, sit on the bench. Yeah, we lost to Greece, blah, blah, blah. But Rick Fox was there that summer. And then this is now another year for Steve Nash. I'll say for Steve Nash, he improved for a guy who was already playing NCAA D1 ball. He improved so much. Like he improved so much over the course of a year. It was really amazing. And then of course he got drafted later, and I played on the national team for, I think it was 4 or 5 summers. So I saw Steve as a rookie, for when the national team program, right up to the year of Santa Clara, and then after he got drafted. And this is one thing I do remember at Steve Nash. The year he finished school and got drafted, he went to the Phoenix Suns, and they had at the time Kevin Johnson was one of their guards, and Jason Kidd was the other. So we're like, Steve Nash is not going to get any playing time on this team, and he didn't. He got no playing time, and then
I always think
finally
of him as getting drafted by the Mavs.
he got drafted by. Let's see here. Did he get drafted by the Mavs first?
Then
I
he
don't
ended
think
up
he did.
MVP
It was
in Phoenix.
it was Phoenix who actually drafted him
Okay.
first.
Okay.
I could be doing this wrong.
Well,
or he was with
keep
the
going
Mavs
with
for a
it.
year.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, yeah, he do that. So
Yeah,
maybe he did get drafted by the Mavs, but he ended up in Phoenix. I do remember that well, where
for
he
sure.
was getting no playing time whatsoever. So he spent the whole year just training,
You're
just
right.
kind of
You're
waiting.
right, Rob. Yeah, his first two seasons, 96, 97, and 97, 98, he was in Phoenix.
Okay,
Yep.
so he didn't hardly play because the two guys in front of him, are Hall of Famers
That's why I
and
don't remember.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But when he came back to the national team that next summer, I've never seen a guy who went, NCAA Division One All American, all these accolades, and was already a great player. At that point, he'd progressed so much. I've never seen someone take a quantum leap forward in their development as he did already as a great player. I mean, he
Yeah.
was wrecking practice. It was
Yeah.
it was incredible. He just worked with a sprint coach, strength training coach, plyometrics, and really turned himself into a weapon, And then when finally Kevin Johnson got injured and he stepped into the gap, then he blew up. And because it was like it's a good thing that Kevin Johnson did get injured, which he often does. Otherwise, Steve would have never played. Nobody would ever have known. But he stepped into the gap and he was incredible. Then he obviously went to Dallas and had some incredible seasons there, and just it was a real eye-opening rebirth for him, which was awesome.
Can you
So
take any credit for Steve Nash's development or his success as a player?
oh, here on this podcast, I absolutely will take all of it.
Yeah.
Reality, no. His actual little brother, Morton Nash, also. Oh, sorry, not Morton. Martin. It was an ongoing joke. He actually, we wrote the year we relocated. We did it out in Vancouver, BC. Steve is a West Coast native. He's from Victoria, Vancouver area. And his brother trained with us all year. I'll take a lot of credit for his brother's development, so much so that he turned to soccer and ended up playing pro soccer in England.
Hey.
His brother did so. But like I said, two talented guys, really great family. Steve was a great teammate to be around, and he really developed and turned into an incredible player and leader for Bassett, on the court. So yeah, obviously you live what you learn.
So people are listening to this, a lifetime of amazing stories. I mean, we could get into the weeds on all sorts of stuff. 13 stops playing internationally. I would love to get into all that. Maybe we'll have to have you on another time. But for people that are still listening, you got to hang with us here because there's even more that comes after his playing career. So you have worked, I don't know how many years now as an agent representing players. How did you get into that?
There's, like you said, let's try to fast track it all. So we had whatever those stops were played in Sweden, Israel. Hey, no Sabbath problems there,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Also no Big Mac and milkshake. That's
That's
not a thing. You can't have milk and cheese. And then the second year in Israel, they actually passed the law where they could have milk and
Oh,
cheese
wow.
together. So it was a
Oh, wow.
huge deal. Like, everyone was like, "You want a cheeseburger?" I was like, "I think I had a few of those
Yeah.
last week, but it's a big deal for you." So Israel, Portugal, Sweden, like I already said, we did New Zealand several times because that was a summer league. One of my kids was born in Belgium, the other was born in England. I did France for years, I did Belgium for years, and then finally moved to the before the agency thing happened. Somebody had called and said, "Hey, we got this thing going out here in LA," and I was like, "Well, what thing do we have?" And at that point, I was about 12 or 13 years in, and they were like, "Oh, it's this hybrid sport." And somebody called me in the middle of the night in New Zealand. I thought, man, this is a crank call. This is ridiculous. And then you go to sleep and like, I had a dream. I don't know. I didn't worry about it. But then they called back and they said, yeah, we want you to come out to LA. We're doing this hybrid sport. It's called SlamBall. It's full contact basketball and trampolines. I was like, this is the craziest thing. But my wife was kind of tired of the travel with the kids.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, we need to transition. I was like, hey, I like LA. Let's go. So we packed up, went over there. SlamBall, came out the box, and we got a TV deal right away. We're on Spike TV. If people remember Spike TV, that's turned into, I don't even know what channel it turned into after, the Men's Network or something crazy. But it was obviously fast and furious. It's the most fun thing I've ever done,
If you've
including
never seen
basketball.
it, pause this episode right now, go to YouTube, look for Rob. I don't know what number you were, but you also played in it. But I mean, just you have to see this. It's literally every boy and man's like, wildest dream to be able to launch yourself off of a trampoline, 12 feet, 13, 14 feet in the air, and you're flying at a padded rim, right? And you're wearing some protection too. You're gonna smash it on somebody's face. Oh, by the way, the defense can tackle you midair, so it's a sight to see for sure.
You summed it up well. Full contact basketball and trampolines, and it's a living video game. When people look at it, especially if you see it live
That's
and
a
you
great
see
description.
bodies,
Yeah,
yeah, flying around
yeah,
15 feet off the earth, it's crazy.
yeah.
But it is as exciting as it sounds. It's been a long and wonderfully horrible story with SlamBall. Just for all the time, I mean, I don't even know how stuff ever gets to TV. We've had so many deals and so much red tape. At one point it kind of stagnated because we had about 3 or 4 seasons. It was at Universal City Walk
Yeah,
as a live
yeah.
event. We took it over to China, where it grew up huge for 7 years. They were actually contesting the what would be the NCAA Chinese Championship with 200 colleges over there. So we were on the ground in China for 7 years, and we built SlamBall. It was amazing. And then COVID crippled everything in China because, of course, there was no more. So it's no longer kind of up and running in China. We brought it back here to the U.S. We had, let's see, 2 years ago, we had a full season on ESPN, which went really well. But that kind of corresponded with the Olympics and with the birth of the new WNBA, which was a big deal. So we're like, okay, let's table it for a minute and just let the dust settle. And now, like we have investors with our group now, including Blake Griffin. He's one of our lead investors. Marshawn Lynch, who is wild. He did some of our on television commentary. So if you actually are looking for SlamBall and you hear a guy just wiling out with Hennessy and wings, that is Marshawn
That's
Lynch, just
Marshawn.
going
Yeah,
crazy.
it's a
Yeah, and
big
we've
deal.
had so many people have been around. It's Shaq loves it. He came to games, and I had a conversation with Shaq once, and all these NBA guys know SlamBall. Like Jason Tatum tweeted about it. Patrick Mahomes was like, "Oh, SlamBall's back. That's a bet." He did that last or 2 summers ago when we came back. And now we're in kind of the space where how do we move here? What's going to happen? Because there's an investors group that wants to go in a certain direction. Then there's the rights group that wants to go in a certain direction. So yeah, I've been involved with that. First as a player for those 3 years, and then now as a SlamBall exec, if you will,
One of the most
where I am.
interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say one of the most interesting experiences I had is when you invited me to come help with a tryout at one point in LA, and so I'm there. I don't even remember what drills I was monitoring, but I mean, you have it's like half basketball drills, half like gymnastics, and then you got like some football stuff. Like everybody's in this gym, and you're like, what are these guys trying out for? Like there's some memes online, like, what is this guy working out for? Or what is he training for? And that was this setting there because it was just a mix of everything, but it was pretty fun because all the guys were excited to hope they were
I
hoping to
had
win.
almost I had almost forgot that you came out there with me. That's right. I remember. We were gonna. I looked around because we hit, like you said, there's a lot of different drills. One of the drills is you take the ball and you dribble full speed at this huge, football blocking bag, and you have to like slam into it. But I was like, okay, we can put Dustin behind that bag. He's not gonna
No,
like his day so much.
no, no.
So we found like 250 pounders and gave them the bags.
Yeah.
And so when the
I
players
think I was
came
timing
screaming up,
something. I was
you
staying
were,
away
you
from
were.
contact. Yeah.
It was like a 3 jump shot drill at the end where they had to make 3 before they took
Yeah.
off, and then they're breathing really heavy, and then they have to make a free throw, and then they have to run up and take this hit on the bag. But yes, that's right. We came out to LA and we did like an open tryout.
I think one of the funniest parts of the whole tryout was a lot of, it's maybe surprising, maybe it's not surprising. A lot of people have never jumped on a trampoline. And the first time they hit that thing, and especially if they're trying to be explosive and their knees just buckle or they bend backwards or whatever. I mean, I saw some people, move in some ways that I don't think they were designed to.
It's a teachable skill, and all we can say to that is there should be a chiropractor on hand. Like that's the best way to put it, because you're absolutely right. When your knees buckle, your spine doesn't actually know what happened, and
Yeah.
that's it's a skill set that needs to be learned, and most high level athletes don't have that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a very very small group of guys who get on a trampoline like it's second nature. It's really small.
Yeah.
Other then there's other people who will never get it, and that's also pretty small. Everybody else lives in the middle somewhere,
Yeah.
so it can be taught, but you have to realize. I mean, we've had so many guys come and they go screaming at the bed, and they jump in the air to jump on the trampoline, and then right before they hit it, they're like, "Hang on a second, something's going to happen here," and I don't know who's in control, and they go like just absolutely cartwheeling out of bounds, like hit the board super hard, or they go just super high and nowhere else,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
fall. So it's everything between. But slam ball was a great experience for a lot of years, still is. We're hoping right now that we're going to see something um, something's got to break with these two groups. So hopefully, we'll see something there. But in the interim, yeah, you live what you learn. And I spent so many years overseas and had a lot of interactions, a lot of agents that I was not super fond of or thought they were really caring about their clients. So I kind of went down that road, and I had a company called Basketball Beyond Borders for a lot of years, which I, in fact, still have now. Since then, I kind of got under an umbrella a lot of my network, because if I place Dustin Com in France, I have a partner in France. If I place Dustin Com in Spain, I have a partner in Spain. So I kind of helped amalgamate everybody together, and we launched something called the Big International Group. And one of the players in the big group, because I'm not personally involved in every player. Some players have the French partner as their primary agent, and I may not do anything with that player at all. And so that's a possibility. So we have a lot of players. And one of them was a guy named Keandre Gaddy, who you had on here. And I didn't know he was SDA or anything. So I actually reached out to him after we spoke. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm a Texas kid. And I was like, okay. So, just a very small world.
Yeah.
So he's under the big umbrella.
Rob, thank you so much for all your time, for sharing your story. I just want to end here with maybe some advice. Maybe there is a kid out there who has aspirations of playing. Maybe they're in high school, they have aspirations of playing at the next level in college, or maybe they're playing in college and have aspirations of playing beyond that. What advice would you give to them?
I mean, I think the best advice that I can give you, like I said, with age comes wisdom theoretically. So theoretically, I have some wisdom now. Didn't have any when I was younger. This is a tough place to be, because the spirit of competition and playing sports at a high level can run very, not necessarily parallel with what your ideals were as you grew up as a kid, especially if you grew up in the church. And that can make it tough. Like, you asked me these things about the Sabbath. How does that work? I think the first place you're going to get answers, hopefully, is on your knees. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. I don't say that I was necessarily searching as hard as I could have been when I was coming up. So the advice I give is, have your family involved in this too, because they have your best interest in mind. And sports is not very forgiving. It's a very, very tough industry, both as an executive, but as a competitor for sure. And you're only as good as your last game. And if one injury can change everything. So knowing all that, I would never tell anyone to not play sports or not, do their best to go as far as they can go if that's what drives you. Because no matter what I say, that love of basketball, that love of football, that's the thing that really drives you. So you only can get guidance from one place, that's on high. What I would say is, as a former player, is I enjoyed every minute of it. I think God was involved in my journey, even when I didn't ask him to be, or maybe I didn't want him to be. He was definitely there, because things have now happened 15 or 20 years later. And I was like, man, why did this, what happened here? Why did this happen at that time? And I didn't get the answers. And I get them 3 decades later. And some answers I don't have yet today. But I definitely know that a lot of things happened that formed me and put me in a place where I needed to be. And that experience wouldn't have happened without sports in my life. And now it's still playing a huge role for me, but I'm in a place where I can hopefully, mentor clients that I have, or be a good sounding board where they're not just hearing, how do we maximize the almighty dollar? Because that is something that's important. You're going to pay your bills. But like I said, if you don't have your family and you don't have God, then you're pretty bankrupt and you don't know it. And the money will not fill that gap.
Well said. Beautiful. Rob, thank you so much for all of the wisdom. You have shared some wisdom, I know it, and for sharing your story. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Mr. Com, always a pleasure. Always my pleasure.